All right, so having seen a basic classification of data types, which is integer, floats, and strings, let us try to understand the role of two extremely important operators with respect to these data types. The operators I'm talking of are the plus and the multiply or the star operator. So let's say I have a variable year, and this time round I define this as a say 2006. As if I do this now, notice I have not given any single quotations here, which means that this has to be an integer, and I can do that by finding, I can do that by using the type command. If I say type year, indeed it's an integer. Now what happens if I add an integer to another integer? Let's say I do year plus 5. Now remember, I'll say, I say plus 5. Now remember, I told you once it's an integer, basically it's a number, which means the interpreter is seeing it no different from a number that you see in mathematics. If I were to do this year plus 5, I'll end up with 2011, which is perfectly fine because 2006 plus 5 is indeed 2011. However, if I, let's say, were to add the same thing with a string, now notice here what I'm doing is I have got an integer here, then the plus operator, and this time around I'm putting the 5 inside, to, let's say, inverted quotes, which is making it a string. So I'm effectively adding an integer to a string, and the moment I do that, I end up in trouble because it is the interpreter doesn't know, it says unseparated operands for the plus. Basically you're trying to mix two different data types, and that is causing problem because one side had integer, one side had strings, and that caused me a problem. Now you might wonder what happens if I were to add, say, two strings. So let's say, do a experiment here. Let's say I say a b c d. Now notice here I've not defined a variable, but again, since I'm putting this in a single quotes, and this is a string, if I were to go and add this to another string, interestingly, this is going to work. And what this will do is that it will concatenate or join these two strings exactly like what used to happen in Scratch when we use join apple banana. Now let us train our attention towards multiplication. So remember, I had the year, which is 2006, an integer. If I multiplied, let's say, year by, say, 10, right? Now here star means multiply, and indeed this is going to be like mathematics. So I'm going to get 20060. Again, this is an integer. What happens if I multiply this by, let's say, 10.12? Now here I'm multiplying an integer with a float because 10.12 is a float, but that's not a problem because both of these are numbers, and multiplying number to number is reasonable. You are getting an answer which is also a float, which is perfectly reasonable. However, what happens if I, let's say, were to multiply a string with an integer? So let's say I did this a b c d. Now this is a string. If I take this and multiply with 5, what happens is actually quite interesting. I get ABCD, ABCD, ABCD repeated 5 times. Strings, now basically multiplication is like a repeated addition. So I'm effectively doing ABCD plus ABCD plus ABCD plus ABCD, all strings 5 times. And hence I'm ending up with this large string. Now you might wonder what happens if I were to do, say, 5.2. Now this is going to give me an error because I cannot take and multiply ABCD to, say, 5.2. I mean, doesn't make, it's kind of logical. It doesn't, we don't really know what it means. So the point I'm trying to make is twofold. One is that we have to be careful when we use even the basic operations like add and multiply. We have to be careful on what the operands are, which means what are the quantities we are applying this operation to. Number two, the outcome. All right, the outcome depends on what kind of operation, what kind of operands you are using here, and those two are important points. I'm going to summarize this here in this table. My request to all of you who are looking at this video is please try this yourself. Convince yourself that this is all correct. Do not try to memorize this. Just be cognizant that when you apply string with a plus operation to another string, it's going to concatenate or basically to join apple banana. For example, ABC plus DEF will be ABC DEF, as we saw. String plus a number will always give a problem because, for example, whether we have ABC plus 10, which is string plus integer, or a string plus float, that is always a problem. String, on the other hand, multiplied with an integer, which is number with no decimal place, gives us a string, which is basically this string concatenated 3 times. So like repeatedly added. So it's ABC, 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 but this is again a string. So result type is also string. String times string, is an error. We can try this. In fact, we can go back and try this. I kind of missed this earlier. So if I tried this, let's say A, B, C, D multiplied by, let's say, D, E, F, G. I mean, this is very reasonable. That's an error because, I mean, what really are we trying to do here, right? You can't even do a repeated addition here, and hence it is an error. String time float is also an error because, like I said, ABC times 5.2, we wouldn't know what to do. However, number plus or multiply by another number is going to be same like mathematics. Plus will be addition, multiply will be multiplication, and we could do integer plus integer, integer to float, float to float. All of that will be perfectly fine. A little bit of compare and contrast is in order here. A lot of you have come from Scratch background where we could be quite lax about what we are doing, right? We could do, lots of things. Like one specific example, which I remember from students' projects, is that in order to get to, let's say, for example, minus 10 from 10, a lot of students would do join minus and 10, right? Now, I would advocate using minus 1 times 10, and students would sometimes argue with me, well, it's the same output. I'm getting minus 10 here, I'm getting minus 10 here. And indeed, Scratch would treat it in a very forgiving manner. It says, all right, it's fine, I'll treat this as minus 10. But now the story is different. When I'm doing minus and 10, in fact, I am doing this operation. I mean, join minus 10, remember, is like plus of two strings. So I'm doing minus plus another string. So I get minus 10, but this minus 10 is actually a string. On the other hand, if I want to do this, I am basically doing integer multiplied by integer. I end up with an integer, and now this will be treated as a number. Remember, a string will not be treated like a mathematical number. The interpreter will see this as sequence of 3 characters, whereas this is a number. And of course, the other two conditions will result in an error. So the point is, in Python, you have to be careful about data types. As I said, minus 10 as a string is different from minus 10, from say, it should be minus 10 here, and also that is different from minus 10.0. I hope this is clear. Take care. See you around. Bye bye.